WWE Extreme Rules is live from the Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia this Sunday, where the top two matches are tag team matches. How very extreme. And for those of you who live in the Philadelphia area, or even New York, New Jersey, if anybody's thinking about buying a ticket and traveling in, you got plenty of tickets to choose from. I could still get 2 floor seats together in the second row as of Thursday. So clearly they are still looking to move some pretty good seats here for this show. There has been no kickoff match announced as of the time I am recording this. There may well be by the time you listen to this, but right now there is no kickoff match announced. One match I thought coming out of Smackdown this week that would be added and never was, and I assume it won't be, is Finn Balor and Shinsuke Nakamura for the Intercontinental Championship. They had a match on Tuesday on SmackDown. Nakamura picked up the win. Clearly he is in line for a title match, and I have to assume that they're going to hold off on that until SummerSlam, because to add that match this late doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. They've got, by my count, about 10 matches already set here for this show, which sounds like more than enough. So I guess we'll find out in the next couple of days if they do add it. But if they haven't added it by now, my guess is they're saving it for a bigger show. We got Drew Gulak defending the Cruiserweight Championship against the former champion Tony Nese. This is Nese's rematch for the title that he lost to Gulak at Stomping Grounds in that match against Gulak and Akira Tozawa, who wrestles Adam Cole for the NXT title, by the way, at the Evolve show this Saturday, live on the network. So think about this. We've got Akira Tozawa, who is competing in 205 Live for the Cruiserweight title, typically, right? Akira Tozawa, a 205 Live star, is wrestling for the NXT Championship on an Evolve show on the WWE Network. He's pretty much crossing all the boxes off here. I wouldn't quite put this in the same category as, Taz wrestling for the ECW title, wrestling a WCW guy while he was under contract at WWE at an ECW show back in, 2000, when he wrestled Mike Awesome. It's not quite as big as that, but that's still a pretty big feather in his cap. Kind of weird. So that's coming up this Saturday, but, Gulak calls himself the Philadelphia Stretcher. Philadelphia is his hometown. It's where he lives. And with a nickname like the Philadelphia Stretcher, I would expect him to get a hero's welcome when he walks down the aisle on Sunday and a win. Even though in WWE, the track record of those wrestling in their hometown isn't always so hot. But I think Gulak's got this one in the bag, so I'm picking him to retain. We've got Daniel Bryan and Rowan defending the SmackDown Tag Team titles against Big E and Xavier Woods of the New Day and Heavy Machinery, Otis and Tucker. On SmackDown this week, Bryan said the fans should be booing the New Day because all they ever do is come out and crack jokes. He said they're great athletes, they have great matches, but they're still just a comedy act. Well, that's New Day in a nutshell right there. He didn't say anything that was wrong. They do have great matches, and they are great athletes, but they are a comedy act. Bryan is like Chris Jericho with the gimmick he was doing in 2008. Comes out, speaks the truth, even if all the sycophants don't want to hear it. Bryan is losing his mind here, or he was, on SmackDown because he realized that he is wrestling 2 comedy acts here in this match. Not just the New Day, but also Heavy Machinery. And they did this 3-way match on Tuesday. It was Bryan, Xavier Woods, and Otis. And I actually thought that match was a lot of fun. And Otis got the pin on Xavier with a pop-up slam. Earlier in the match, they had Otis hit a double suplex on Bryan and Woods simultaneously. He held them in the air vertically for a few seconds before dropping them. That was impressive. And I realized that Daniel Bryan and Xavier Woods are not exactly the biggest guys on the roster, but still, I thought that was impressive. I thought Tucker did a good job too. I got to give him credit. I'm a big fan of Otis. He's just a wacky kind of guy. Tucker, it's kind of like, I think, the Street Profits. A lot of people, myself included, were always kind of talking about Montez Ford and what a freaky athlete he is and the big frog splash. And he's very charismatic, very outgoing. And Angelo Dawkins tends to be an afterthought in some of these conversations. I do think that Montez Ford has a higher ceiling than he does. But, you know, Dawkins shouldn't get completely shut out of the conversation either. And I think the same here applies for Heavy Machinery. You know, Otis is, you know, a funny guy and, again, has a lot of personality and is very weird. And he's the first person I think of when I think of Heavy Machinery. But Tucker has been, you know, he's been holding his own, especially on promos. I thought he did a really good job on Tuesday. I have been pleasantly surprised by how they are using Heavy Machinery of late. And they may well end up on the back burner again, after, you know, not again, but if and when, and I think it's a matter of when, not if, they lose this match, who knows? They can end up on the back burner. But they have been featured a pretty good amount, and they're starting to get over, I think. Unfortunately for them, I think they eat the fall on Sunday. Bryan and Rowan retain, and that paves the way for Bryan and Rowan against the New Day, straight up at SummerSlam. Meanwhile, the Raw Tag Team titles will be on the line when the Revival defend against the Usos. Jimmy and Jay, this is the match that I could see ending up on the kickoff show. I mean, look, the Cruiserweight title match is always going to be a top candidate to get bumped to the kickoff. And it could happen this time too. But the match hasn't been announced yet. If I had to take a guess, I think this is a pretty good candidate for it. Just because of this just feels so tacked on. And also because I could see them looking at a match like this and wanting a hot match on the kickoff show to get people excited and maybe entice people to want to. And this, you know, I gotta say this. I say that, and as I'm saying it, I realize, why am I saying this? Because it feels like old logic to me when they had preview shows on the preview channel on pay-per-view, or if they were airing some preview stuff, let's say on USA Network or something, and you want to entice people in some way to tune in. You know, they used to do that with Sunday Night Heat back in the late 90s. Everything was booming. It felt like everybody was over. Even the mid-carders were over. Everybody had a storyline. Everybody had something going on. And Sunday Night Heat could really pack a punch back in the day. You'd have Stone Cold come out on Sunday Night Heat and have a face-off with Vince McMahon. They loaded that show up, and there were many times where the copyright would come on. I probably by that point had already put my order in for the pay-per-view, but if I didn't, you know, a lot of that stuff would get me wanting to grab my remote control and order the pay-per-view. Is that really even a thing anymore? It just feels like with the network and everything, I don't know. How many people, in all honesty, do you think are going to just turn around and say, hey, I don't have a network subscription. What a great match. What a great match between the Usos and the Revival. I have to order the network now. I have to see the rest of this pay-per-view. Are you really going to have this flood of people who don't already subscribe to the network rushing to their devices to subscribe because so-and-so had a great match? You know, they're offering 3 months of the WWE Network right now for 99 cents. That's their latest deal to try to entice people to sign up, which can only mean one thing. Earnings are on the way. They got to get those numbers up. Anyway, the Usos are looking to become 7-time tag team champions here. We had a 6-man tag team 2 out of 3 falls match. Yes, you heard that correctly. A 6-man tag team 2 out of 3 falls match on Raw last Monday. They are out of control with this 2 out of 3 falls bullshit. The no wrestling during commercial break. For the love of God, enough already. Please. It was The Miz and the Usos against Elias and the Revival. Elias ran away from The Miz. He ran up the ramp. This distracted Jimmy Uso, who walked into a shatter machine. That gave the Revival the first fall, so they could cut to commercial. Then we come back. Miz gives Scott Dawson the skull-crushing finale, wins the second fall. The Usos immediately tag themselves in, hit a bunch of super kicks, and Jey Uso hits a Samoan splash on Scott Dawson to win the match. So it's the Usos with the momentum going into the pay-per-view, which I think swings the other way on Sunday. I think the Revival retain. It is Cesaro who knocks for Aleister Black. We found out on Smackdown this week that Cesaro is the man who knocked on Aleister Black's door the week before. He played Ding Dong Ditch on Aleister Black, and now as payback, he gets to have his head kicked off. It's a good thing he wears a mouthpiece. And Cesaro really is the ideal opponent, I think, for Aleister in a lot of ways. You know he's going to give him a good match. I mean, I think it would be impossible for these two not to have at least a good match, right? So Cesaro, if you had to look at the roster, you look up and down, you had to make a list of like 5 guys. Who would I want to wrestle? It's my first big singles match on pay-per-view. You know, for all intents and purposes, this is his debut. Forget the tag team stuff with Ricochet. Forget winning the NXT title. It's like the slate wiped clean, never happened. He's starting fresh. This is his debut. And unless it's the old days where they're going to put you on TV against some job guys and you get to show off your moves, because that's not the way it works now. They put you right into the fire. They put you right in there with name guys now. If you had to make a list of 5 people, not NXT, the main roster, who you would want to be in the ring with if you were having your debut match, to give you the best possible chance of having a really, really great match, Cesaro's going to be on that list. He's a great opponent for Aleister Black to have. So that's number 1. And they've tried to give Cesaro more of an edge these past few weeks on Raw with the No Way Jose stuff. He's all business, no nonsense. He comes out, he's beating people up. They're trying to make him more of a threat. But he's also somebody that you know they're not going to do anything major with in Cesaro. I'm sorry to say, but they're just not. So it's a sure win for Black in his debut match as a single. You're not putting him in there, like I said, with a top guy, a top name right off the bat. You're not putting him in there with Bray Wyatt, who also has yet to re-debut. I thought there was a chance. The whole, knocking on the door and Bray's whole thing is let me in. There was at least a chance it could be him, and I'm happy it isn't. It would serve no purpose to beat him or to beat Aleister Black in their first match. So I think Cesaro is a fine choice. This should be really good. The way that Aleister has been whining, it seems like on television now for weeks. I'm not sure if the plan is for him to be a babyface or if the plan is for him to be a heel. It really depends on what plans they have for him. Is the idea to push him to the point where he could challenge, let's say, Finn Balor for the Intercontinental title? If so, you know what? It might be better to start him out as a heel. Remember, every heel is just a babyface in waiting. Even you, MJF. One day, as easy as it is to hate that guy, believe me, he'll be a huge babyface. So starting him out that way I don't think would be such a horrible thing. They split him and Ricochet. Ricochet is one of their top lead babyfaces now on Monday nights. And Aleister could be one of their top heels on Tuesdays. Bayley defends the SmackDown Women's title against Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross in a handicap match. Alexa's been suffering from a bad sinus infection, which is why she has not been used on TV the past couple of weeks, and why Nikki Cross apparently was added to this match at all. Because should Alexa not be ready to go come Sunday, Nikki can face Bayley. Or even if Alexa is there but she can't do much, they can take her out early, she could lay on the floor, lay on the outside, and Nikki can wrestle most of the match. During the contract signing for this on Tuesday, with Bayley and Nikki said, all of your friends have abandoned you. And between that and the fact that it's 2 against 1, this would be the perfect spot for a Sasha Banks return. Seen some stories lately that she's on her way back. It's just a matter of when and not if. This would be a good spot for it. Even if it is after the match and not during the match. Although if she came out after the match, that would only make sense if she then beats up Bayley. Because what real friend would leave their buddy out there 2-on-1? If they're in the building, if they're in the back, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for Sasha to just stay back there until after the match. So if this match ends and then Sasha comes out, I would be very leery when you see her walking down to the ring with some friend she would turn out to be. But I would love to see Sasha come back, pretend like she's there to help Bayley, maybe even chase off Alexa and Nikki, when the match is over, and then lower the boom on Bayley. I mean, think about it. There's no need for them to even be friends anymore. She left Bayley high and dry after WrestleMania. We haven't seen or heard from Sasha at all. What kind of friend is that? So that then leads to, I guess it would lead to Sasha against Bayley, although more importantly, because I really don't give a shit about that. I don't really care much for that as much as I'd like to see heel Sasha Banks start a program with Becky Lynch for the Raw Women's title. Sasha's supposed to be a member of the Raw roster anyway. That's the roster she's listed on. I had to go to WWE.com and look up the roster that she's on. Not just because she's been gone since WrestleMania, but because this wild card bullshit. It is impossible to follow what brand everybody belongs to. I was sitting here thinking, wait a minute, I think she's on Raw, but I'm not even sure anymore. Let me go check. And sure enough, she's on the Raw page, and Bayley is on the Smackdown page. So if they ever drop this wildcard shit and get their asses serious about a brand split, and who knows, maybe they will once Paul Heyman and Eric Bischoff really get in there and, start taking the reins, that's where she's going to be anyway. She's going to end up on Monday Night Raw, which is where Becky Lynch is. They don't even have to do Sasha against Bayley, or if they want to do it, hey, use the dumb wild card rule, blow the match off on TV. But the feud that I want to see is Sasha and Becky. As much for Becky Lynch as anything else. I'm not looking at it as some kind of reward for Sasha Banks, who and unlike Jon Moxley, like Seth Rollins said, she took her ball and she went home. And you're going to have people who argue, well, why would you reward that? If she immediately comes back and she's gifted with a championship program with Becky Lynch, one of the top faces in the entire company, what message does that send? You know what? That's a fair argument to make. It's a fair point to make. Me personally, I don't really care about that. I'm looking at this as a fan. I'm looking at the rosters, the way they're set up, and I'm looking for the most interesting potential matchup that they could put together for Becky Lynch. And it ain't Charlotte. We've seen enough of that. It's not Bayley. It's not Nikki. It's not Alexa. It's not Natalya. I come back to Sasha Banks. As a heel. That's a very important point to make. As a heel. Because this shit with Lacey Evans has got to stop. It has got to end at Extreme Rules. So this is as much for Becky as anything else. This is like death. No wonder Becky is doing these interviews and crowing about how she still wants a singles match with Ronda Rousey. Of course she does. That women's division has been all but dead since Ronda left. She needs somebody like Sasha Banks right now. So I hope that's the direction they're going in here. But as far as this match is concerned, I don't see a title change. Whether Sasha comes back or not, I think Bayley retains. Then we have Braun Strowman. Ruptured pelvis and all, or spleen, I don't even know anymore. Whichever organ it was, these frickin' injuries. Against the almighty Bobby Lashley in a last man standing match. Strowman must have mutant healing powers to be cleared by WWE Medical so soon after such a devastating injury. We've seen these two have an arm wrestling contest. We've seen these two have a tug of war. We've seen these two have just a straight up plain old professional wrestling match at Super Saudi Showdown last month. A match that Strowman won. This all boils down to whether or not they look at this as the blow-off. If this is the blow-off, then Braun Strowman wins. And I am picking him to win. He is my prediction. But if this is the blow-off, if this is the big send-off for these two guys and their feud, then Braun wins. They had their Falls Count Anywhere match 2 weeks ago, which ended with them destroying the set and a bunch of explosions. Strowman hasn't been seen since, and on Monday they had Lashley squash Rey Mysterio. Rey's first match back, he was out with a separated shoulder for about a month or 5 weeks. He came back, got squashed on night one by Bobby Lashley. And to me, that just screams a Braun Strowman win. Especially if they want to have any chance of rehabbing this guy to a point where people might actually want to see him challenge for the championship again. I don't get the impression that there's this groundswell of support for wanting Braun Strowman to challenge for the Universal title anytime soon. He's cooled off a lot. Yeah, he gets cheered when he comes out, but he's cooled off a lot from where he had been at his peak. If they want to have any shot of trying to get that back, he's got to start winning. Bad enough he got, put up in a hospital by this guy. He's got to come back, and he's got to rip this guy to shreds. But if they want to take this all the way to SummerSlam, if this isn't the blow-off, I don't know where you go from here. We had a false count anywhere. Now we have a last man standing. What would the next stipulation even be? I don't even know. You can't do Hell in a Cell, right? Because that's a whole pay-per-view all by itself. I'm not even sure what the next stipulation could be. Loser leaves town. There were rumors a few months ago that Lashley's contract was coming due in August. And I haven't heard anything about that since, so I don't know if that was just a false report. Maybe it was true and he's since re-signed. There's been no stories about them courting him or sending him a contract offer. They'd want to lock him in for a 5-year deal. I mean, if they're locking Mike and Maria and the Revival and Anderson and Gallows into long-term 5-year contracts, that they would offer Lashley a sweet deal. So I'm just throwing that out there. I haven't heard anything about that, but if that's true, and if he is, let's say he was to leave, well, then I would book a loser leaves town type match. Make it a real stipulation. You could blow it off at SummerSlam, but I have no idea if that's the plan or not. But if they do take this all the way to SummerSlam, that changes things, because then I feel like Lashley has to win. And with the last man standing stipulation, it's a way for Braun to lose without being pinned. So I'm kind of torn on this as far as who I think is going to win, because it just depends on where they go from here. But I'm sticking with Braun Strowman to win. Again, this guy put him in the hospital. Nothing but total victory will suffice for Braun Strowman. AJ Styles challenges Ricochet for the United States Championship. Ricochet just won the title from Samoa Joe a few weeks ago at Stomping Grounds. He's not even a full month yet into his title reign. AJ Styles has a pinfall win over him on TV. Ricochet got a win over AJ a couple weeks back, so they're all knotted up here. 1 win apiece. I would not take the title off of Ricochet right now. I'm picking Ricochet to retain. I think it would be a mistake to take that title off of him right now. I don't think AJ needs it. I think this should be about establishing Ricochet as a top guy on the brand. Here in this match, he's got the deck stacked against him. Anderson and Gallows, they're going to be lurking. I think this probably goes all the way to SummerSlam. And I would do a ladder match on that show for the U.S. title. I would still have Ricochet win. You can have Ricochet win here and still find a way to do one more match and have him win there. AJ can take a couple of losses. I don't think he'll lose much from it. So if that's the plan here, to keep this thing going, I would build to a ladder match. And that could be a hell of a match between those two for the championship at SummerSlam. But no more, please, no more hot potato with this title. It went from Joe to Ray, right back to Joe, and then right to Ricochet and Joe. I think Joe's first defense. So I think and I hope Ricochet retains. Speaking of Joe, we have Samoa Joe challenging Kofi Kingston for the WWE Championship. Kofi hurt his back in a match against Dolph Ziggler at a live event last Sunday. That's why he didn't wrestle on TV this week. He should be good to go for the pay-per-view. Supposedly it was just a minor injury. I think he's back wrestling since then, so shouldn't be an issue. Hopefully everything will be fine as far as that goes. As far as Samoa Joe, if you look at his WWE run from his NXT days until now, Joe was NXT champion. He had a short run recently with the U.S. title. Other than that, Samoa Joe is a guy, if you look at his history in WWE over the last 3 or 4 years, he talks a big game. He probably is the best talker in the entire company. Talks a big game, but has not had a lot of success on the main roster when it comes to delivering on those big words. Even Bray Wyatt, the eater of pins, as I used to call him, and hopefully I won't have to call him that anymore, but we'll see. Bray Wyatt, the eater of pins, another one who would talk a big game in his promos, these spooky promos. And then what would happen? He would lose. all of his big matches, he would lose. Even Bray Wyatt had about 6 weeks or so as WWE champion. Joe never has. Joe's never had that before. Never been Universal Champion, never been WWE Champion, never won the big one. And I don't think he will here either. I think he's a guy that Kofi, in their mind, can beat to get them to SummerSlam. And I hate that, because if it were up to me, I'd put the title on Joe here. Kofi's had a good run. Credit to WWE. They've done everything they could possibly do to keep this guy strong. He's lost, I can't even think of all the times he's lost since WrestleMania. You know, maybe once on TV. They've kept him very strong. They've had him run through Daniel Bryan in multiple matches, Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, Dolph Ziggler in multiple matches. They've given him people to beat. But if you give me the choice of building my brand, if I'm Eric Bischoff, if you're Vince McMahon and I'm Eric Bischoff, well, pal, you want to build your brand around somebody, who's it going to be? And my 2 choices were Kofi Kingston and Samoa Joe. Samoa Joe gets my vote. You give me the choice, Kofi Kingston or Samoa Joe, who do you want to put your world title on? I'm picking Samoa Joe. He should have gotten it at Great Balls of Fire 2 years ago. 2 years ago this month. Another failure for Samoa Joe. Failed to win the Universal title from Brock Lesnar. Here's another opportunity. But I think Kofi retains. Question is, does Joe choke him out and beat him down so bad that after the match, Brock Lesnar cashes in his Money in the Bank contract and wins the title? Paul Heyman was on Raw Monday night. He was teasing, he was doing his monthly tease that Brock might cash in on Sunday, either against Seth Rollins or possibly Kofi Kingston. He said that he hasn't lied about giving us a spoiler since before WrestleMania 30. So either he's giving us all a heads up, he said, or he's just messing with Seth Rollins and Kofi Kingston's heads. He said only he and Brock know the answer. I've grown very tiresome of a lot of these Paul Heyman promos. Not because Paul Heyman is a bad promo, but he says the same thing over and over again. I for one, cannot wait for Brock to cash in, so that way Heyman gets some new material. Do I think Brock is going to cash in and win the championship on Sunday? No. No, I don't. I'll be shocked if he's even there. I guess he could show up, but do I think he's going to show up and cash in? No. I think Kofi takes this title all the way to SummerSlam and probably drops it there, whether it's to Brock Lesnar or somebody else. I'm not sure who, but that's what I think happens. So I'm picking Kofi to retain. And we have Roman Reigns and The Undertaker teaming for the very first time to take on Drew McIntyre and Shane McMahon. No holds barred, which means somebody can interfere and it's totally legal. I see a lot of people on Twitter now, by the way, sharing that old video of Undertaker losing his mind on the apron during some tag team match at a live event many years ago, waiting for the hot tag, pouring water on his head, racing back and forth on the apron like he was on bath salts. I mentioned that weeks ago. I said, you know what? If they're going to do a tag team match with The Undertaker, I'd love to see them repeat that spot. This time do it on TV. I think it would be awesome. I think that would be great. Now, all of a sudden now, I see all these people tweeting out video of that. I'm glad they all agree. I want him to do that spot again, this time on TV. But, I look at this match, and I mentioned earlier on Monday night, they did this 2 out of 3 fall 6-man tag, and it was The Miz and the Usos against Elias and the Revival. So Miz now has been reduced to feuding with Elias. And I'm looking at this match and I'm saying, you know who the real loser is in all of this? The real loser is The Miz. The Miz had a program with Shane McMahon dating back to the end of last year. Back to when he was still a heel and Shane was a babyface and everybody loved Shane because he wasn't completely overexposed yet. And Miz spent weeks and weeks trying to convince Shane to be his tag team partner. Remember that? Feels like ages ago. This goes back all the way to the end of last year. a program that I was a fan of at first. It was a long-term story. They were building to it nicely. It was not the main program on SmackDown. It was just like a mid-card story. And it was progressing very nicely. And for what it was, I enjoyed it. And Shane wasn't in every other segment on every other frickin' show. So I kind of liked it. And it built and it built and it built to a Shane heel turn and a match at WrestleMania. And that's where it should have ended. Only it didn't. Shane won, even if it was a fluke. He won. He beat The Miz. And then he won again. He won again. He beat The Miz again. Fluky though the finish may have been, he still won. He beat him in the cage match. Then on TV just a few weeks ago, again, even though he was outnumbered and he was laid out by a Claymore kick, Shane McMahon tapped out The Miz in a shitty triangle choke. The Miz tapped out to Shane McMahon. He has been laid out by so many Claymore kicks, I've lost count. Now he doesn't even have a match on this show. You would think he's the perfect person to plug in there and be partners with Roman Reigns. Nobody has a bigger issue with Shane than The Miz. And instead, he's not even on the show, and it's The Undertaker teaming up with Roman Reigns, who had absolutely no beef before this with Drew McIntyre, and the beef, whatever beef he had with Shane McMahon, was settled. It was squashed after their WrestleMania match 3 years ago. But The Miz ain't no Undertaker, right? When it comes to star power, which is the real reason why he's in this match. Although, even the great star power of The Undertaker apparently is not enough to keep sections of this building on Sunday from being tarped off. So I don't really know how effective that plan is kind of being for them right now. But they were banking on the whole idea that Undertaker and Roman Reigns, first time ever tag team partners, wow, what a big attraction. And to some people it might be. Although I question how big of an attraction it really is. Now on Raw Monday, they did this whole show-long storyline. They promoted Roman Reigns and a partner of Shane McMahon's choosing to take on Shane and Drew McIntyre. And so throughout the show, we see Shane and Drew. They approach Tony the Garbage Man about being Roman's tag team partner. He should have asked Tony if he had a garbage can big enough to fit that entire show from Monday, because that's exactly where it belonged, in the garbage. Then later they met with the beer vendor about being Roman's partner, before finally offering $5,000 to a janitor with a limp to be Roman's partner. All he had to do, Shane said, was just stand on the apron. That's it. And so it was to be Roman Reigns and Gary the Goat Garbett against Drew McIntyre and Shane McMahon. Only when he came out, Gary was wearing a Dos Caras mask. And hat tip to Lucha Blog for pointing that out. I would never have known that. But Lucha Blog pointed that out, since the announcers sure didn't. The announcers never would, but at least they did. Dos Caras, by the way, the father of Alberto Del Rio. Gary, by the way, the person who played Gary on TV, he used to work for WWE. He was a director of live events in the Memphis area for them. He left the company to go work for the Memphis franchise in the AAF, which was that new Charlie Ebersol football league that started a year before. It got the year jump on the XFL, and then it died, it flamed out, folded. I don't even think they finished the season. Barely lasted one season. So it sounds like Gary may be looking for a job for real. But when he got tagged into the match, he ran wild. He hit an enziguri, he hit a flip dive, and all of these fancy moves that a janitor with a limp should not be able to do. And then, unfortunately, he ate a Claymore kick, and Shane McMahon pinned him. After the match, Roman Reigns goes over, he pulls off the mask, and we learn that it was not Gary under the mask, it was Cedric Alexander. Apparently there were a lot of people going to bat for Cedric who pushed for him to be in this role and get some very valuable television time. And hey, good for him. Cedric was featured on Raw. He was featured in the Raw main event. That's about the only positive thing I can say about it. Cedric, after he lost and was unmasked, he was all smiles. He had a bloody mouth, but he was all smiles. Even though he just lost the match. I saw the @WWE Universe Twitter account after the show ended tweeted out a GIF of an unmasked Cedric Alexander with the caption, "Well, that makes sense. Nicely done, Cedric. Nicely done. He lost. He lost. Yeah, nice job there, pal. You lost the match for your team. Yeah, way to go." At least Gary the janitor still got his $5,000 that he was promised. At least according to Cedric, he did. That was my other thought. Cedric Alexander just stole a $5,000 payday from this guy, but he claims he got his money. But hey, good job. This stuff with Roman and Shane, it needs to die on Sunday. Reigns, Undertaker, picking them for the win. And Reigns and McIntyre, they're gonna carry this one. They're gonna have to carry this one. Shane McMahon, the moment he hits the ring, he looks like he's about to collapse. The Undertaker always looks like he's about to collapse. His entrance is great. Once the bell rings, though, you never know what you're gonna get. It's probably not gonna be that good. So Reigns and McIntyre, they're gonna have to carry the load here. Undertaker and Shane, I think they could do some big spots. And maybe out of this, and by the way, tag team match, perfect situation for the Undertaker. And maybe out of this, they decide to do a singles match at SummerSlam, which has been rumored, between Undertaker and Drew McIntyre. There's been murmurs of that lately. There's been stories that Undertaker has personally requested to work with McIntyre, which is why we're getting this match. I still think that him being in this match on Sunday has way more to do with him wanting to make people forget that awful match with Goldberg in Saudi Arabia. Of course, to do that, you've got to replace an awful match with a good match. So, you don't want to replace an awful match with an equally awful match. I don't think... It would be very hard for this to be worse than that debacle that we got when Goldberg got hurt in Saudi Arabia. So, if this match somehow is as bad or worse, we're in for one of the worst matches of the year. And I don't believe we're in for one of the worst matches of the year. I think this actually has the potential to end up being good. You know, maybe with some gimmicks and smoke and mirror. I mean, they already got the no-holds-barred stipulation. So they can use weapons and kendo sticks and chairs. And, you know, they can do all the bells and whistles to make this a good enough match. But maybe he does want to work with Drew. Maybe there is something to that. Maybe it does lead to a singles match. But because this is a tag team match, whatever Undertaker does and whatever Shane does should be limited to some big spots. I mean, hey, I think we could also see Kevin Owens, and don't forget the Kevin Owens factor in this. He could factor into the finish here. I mean, I have Undertaker and Reigns to win. It's possible they win off interference by Kevin Owens. Look what happened on Smackdown. Look how Smackdown went off the air on Tuesday. Roman Reigns beat Dolph Ziggler. Kevin Owens came out of the crowd after he was kicked out of the building, and he gave Shane a stunner. He left Shane laying with a stone-cold stunner. Plus, Owens doesn't have a match. He doesn't have any role at all right now on this show. And so who knows? Maybe it leads to Shane one-on-one against Owens at SummerSlam. At least if they did that, you know what? It would be a prominent match for Kevin Owens, which is good. But at least that would mean the end of the stuff with Roman and Shane. So I could live with that. If the idea is to go to SummerSlam and to do Shane McMahon one-on-one against Kevin Owens, I can live with that. So long as it puts an end to all of this stuff with Roman and Drew and Shane. I mean, Roman and Drew have been going at it since WrestleMania. I think enough is enough. And finally, Becky Lynch teams with the man's man, Seth Rollins, to put their Raw Women's and Universal titles on the line against the lady and the ladies' man, Lacey Evans and... I tried to say that with a straight face. Lacey Evans and Baron von Corbin in a mixed tag... Let me see if I get this right. A mixed tag team Extreme Rules winners take all match. Whew. Is it just me, or do these stipulations just get more convoluted every single week? Mixed tag team Extreme Rules winners take all match. That is a mouthful. And yes, ladies man Baron Corbin. There's probably people listening to this going, ladies man, what the fuck is he talking about? Yes, ladies man Baron Corbin. Did you hear about this? I think this may have originated with some report from the Observer. I don't want to blame Dave if he's not the one who started this. I'm not sure exactly where it came from, but Corbin supposedly scores very high with the younger female demographic. I don't know what kind of internal study or poll may have been done, but they look at these demos, and he scores very high with the younger female demographic. The same fans, supposedly, who used to go crazy, 10 years ago, for Jeff Hardy, when Jeff Hardy was at the peak of his popularity as a single star. These same women, girls, whatever, now get a tickle in their pickle for Baron Corbin. Vince McMahon thinks the ladies swoon for Baron Corbin. Yeah, and the Mind Flayer from Stranger Things would look good in a G-string. Holy shit. Multiple times now, Corbin has wrestled Seth Rollins for the Universal title, and he has lost. Multiple times now, Lacey Evans has wrestled Becky Lynch for the Raw Women's title and lost. So now they have the chance to win all of the titles in the same match. And again, they will lose. This will be, I believe, the third such time losing for each of them. And they gave the outcome away the moment they announced that the match would be winners take all, which means that if Rollins were to be pinned, not only would he lose his title, but his girlfriend would lose her title as well. And the same for Becky. If she loses to Lacey, then Corbin wins the Universal title. Had they not announced that, I still would have, picked Beth and, Seth. I'm literally now merging Seth and Becky and calling them Beth. Seth and Becky would have been my pick either way. But at least you could have argued that, all right, maybe something happens and Lacey wins the women's title or something. But now that it's winners take all, there's no way in hell that they're winning those titles. And first of all, that is a supremely shitty way for a title to change hands. It was shitty when The Rock pinned Vince McMahon at the King of the Ring in 2000 to win the WWF title from Triple H. Yeah, 6-man tag. The Rock pinned Vince McMahon to win Triple H's title. That sucked. And it's just as shitty today. But WWE isn't going into its second biggest show of the year with Baron Corbin and Lacey Evans as its top champions. The posters, I'm sure, are already printed. The banners are already made. There's no way they're taking those titles off their new power couple and putting them on those two. So Seth and Becky retain. But again, the question looms, just like for the WWE title match, does Brock Lesnar cash in his money in the bank on Seth Rollins when this thing is over? I say no. But if Brock really wanted to stick it to Seth Rollins, and if they wanted to get some real heat on Lesnar, he'd slip in and he'd lay Becky Lynch out with an F5. Rollins would lose his mind if that happened. But they won't do it. And I know why they won't do it. I guess never say never. I mean, look, they had, Nia Jax get beaten up by a whole bunch of guys in the Royal Rumble and she ate an RKO. But she's a special case. And to them, Nia Jax, she's big enough to hang with the guys. It's a different situation. Still hypocritical, but a different situation. But I don't see them having the guts to do something like that where Brock comes in and gives her an F5. But again, Seth would lose his mind. That's one way to play mind games with Seth Rollins if that's what Lesnar wanted to do. I mean, me personally, I'll tell you what I'm tired of. I'm tired of waiting for Bray Wyatt to show up. Would somebody let this fucking guy in already? For weeks, let me in. Let me in. Now he's not even on TV. He's not even asking anymore. Let me in. Nobody will let this guy in. I'm tired of seeing puppets all over the place. I mean, look, I love, Ramblin' Rabbit and Festivus the Pig or Huskus. Huskus the Pig. And what's the other one? The other puppet. Oh, God, I forgot the names already. We got Huskus. We got I'm rambling right now. Ramblin' Rabbit. Oh, Mercy the Buzzard. That's right. Mercy the Buzzard, Abby the Witch. I'm tired of seeing puppets popping up every single week. We don't get any more Firefly Funhouse segments, which I enjoyed. We don't even get those anymore. I would love to see The Fiend make an appearance either after the match, or even if they want to hold off until Raw the next night. You don't have to blow everything off on the pay-per-view. They could do it the next night on TV. Have him finally show up in his new outfit, in the flesh, to build to a Bray Wyatt, Seth Rollins championship match at SummerSlam. And before you say, well, what has Bray Wyatt done to deserve a title match? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But that's never stopped them before. Haha! I'm using their logic against them. Boy, it's a lot easier just to not bother having logic with anything. You can pretty much do whatever the fuck you want. Now I know why they do it all the time. But look, you could always explain it away by having a multi-man match on TV sometime between now and then, and Bray can win that, and there, boom. He's your number one contender. I mean, it's not as though they have some kind of ranking system in place for this sort of thing, right? What a silly concept. It's not like I've ever pitched that idea before. They don't have anything like that. They can pretty much make up the rules as they go along. So I say the hell with it. Get him in there. He'd be more interesting than anyone else they have on deck at this point. Who else would you put in there? With Seth Rollins for the championship at SummerSlam. You want to do Baron Corbin again? So you can go 0 for 4? AJ Styles? He's probably still going to be occupied with Ricochet. Who else is there? That's your Extreme Rules card. 10 matches, that's a full card. I don't really think that they're going to be adding any more matches. I think Balor and Nakamura probably will be saved for another day. I'll be live on YouTube after the pay-per-view. I'll be doing a live stream review for the entire show, so please join me, whatever time that may be. I mean, the last pay-per-view ended pretty early. Usually they go until about 11 or so, but whenever it goes off the air, we'll go live on YouTube. Please sub to the channel if you have not already done so. That way you get all of the notifications. However this pay-per-view turns out on Sunday, I do hope that we can all agree at least on this much. I was looking at this weekend, and for me, I mean, it's a lot of wrestling. I got 5,000 things going on, and it's frustrating because I wish I could just watch everything live when it airs, and I'm not going to be able to, and it's a pain in the ass. But if you are a wrestling fan, this is going to be a fun weekend. You know, between Extreme Rules, the G1, the Evolve show, and the AEW Fight for the Fallen show. There's something for everyone. So it should be a fun weekend.